The means of defense foreign danger have been always the instruments of tyranny at home. The advancement of science and the diffusion of information is the best aliment to true liberty. The purpose of separation of church and state is to keep forever from these shores the ceaseless strife that has soaked the soul of Europe in blood for centuries. There are more instances of the abridgment of the freedom of the people by gradual and silent encroachments of those in power than by violent and sudden usurpations. Philosophy is common sense with big words. The truth is that all men having power ought to be mistrusted. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. The accumulation of all powers, legislative, executive, and judiciary in the same hands, whether of one, a few, or many, and whether hereditary, self-appointed, or elective, may justly be pronounced the very definition of tyranny. Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power knowledge gives. A popular government without popular information or the means of acquiring it is but a prologue to a farce or a tragedy, or perhaps both. It will be of little avail to the people that the laws are made by men of their own choice, if the laws be so voluminous that they cannot be read, or so incoherent that they cannot be understood. Americans have the right and advantage of being armed, unlike the citizens of other countries whose governments are afraid to trust the people with arms. I cannot undertake to lay my finger on that article of the Constitution which granted a right to Congress of expending on objects of benevolence the money of their constituents. The Constitution preserves the advantage of being armed which Americans possess over the people of almost every other nation where the governments are afraid to trust the people with arms. Charity is no part of the legislative duty of the government. The means of defense against foreign danger have been always the instruments of tyranny at home. Among the Romans it was a standing maxim to excite a war whenever a revolt was apprehended. Throughout all Europe, the armies kept up under the pretext of defending have enslaved the people. Religious bondage shackles and debilitates the mind and unfits it for every noble enterprise, every expanded prospect. History records that the money changers have used every form of abuse, intrigue, deceit, and violent means possible to maintain their control over governments, controlling money and its issuance. No nation could preserve its freedom in the midst of continual warfare. You must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself. Knowledge will forever govern ignorance, and a people who mean to be their own governors must arm themselves with the power knowledge gives. Equal laws protecting equal rights the best guarantee of loyalty and love of country. All men having power ought to be distrusted to a certain degree. Where an excess of power prevails, property of no sort is duly respected. No man is safe in his opinions, his person, his faculties, or his possessions. Learned institutions ought to be favorite objects with every free people. They throw that light over the public mind which is the best, security against crafty and dangerous encroachments on the public liberty. The means of defense against foreign danger historically have become the instruments of tyranny at home. The operations of the federal government will be most extensive and important in times of war and danger. Those of the state governments in times of peace and security. As a man is said to have a right to his property, he may be equally said to have a property in his rights. If tyranny and oppression come to this land, it will be in the guise of fighting a foreign enemy. Liberty may be endangered by the abuses of liberty as well as by the abuses of power. Liberty is to faction what air is to fire. Let me recommend the best medicine in the world, a long journey at a mild season through a pleasant country in easy stages. Liberty may be endangered by the abuse of liberty, but also by the abuse of power. A good government implies two things. First, fidelity to the object of government, which is the happiness of the people. Secondly, a knowledge of the means by which that object can be best attained. Had every Athenian citizen been a Socrates, every Athenian assembly would still have been a mob. Knowledge will forever govern ignorance. Of all the enemies to public liberty, war is perhaps the most to be dreaded because it comprises and develops the germ of every other. In framing a government which is to be administered by men, over men, the great difficulty is this: you must first enable the government to control the governed, and in the next place, oblige it to control itself. During almost 15 centuries has the legal establishment of Christianity been on trial. What have been its fruits? More or less in all places, pride and indolence in the clergy, ignorance and servility in the laity, in both superstition, bigotry, and persecution. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. Experience is the oracle of truth, and where its responses are unequivocal, they ought to be conclusive and sacred. The civil rights of none shall be abridged on account of religious belief or worship, nor shall any national religion be established, nor shall the full and equal rights of conscience be in any manner or on any pretext infringed. If we are to be one nation in any respect, it clearly ought to be in respect to other nations. Religious bondage shackles and debilitates the mind and unfits it for every noble enterprise, every expanded prospect.